All right. So we are on chapter 1.1 lecture notes. And I will tell you this section 1 of chapter 1 is the longest section in this chapter. Sections 2, 3, and 4 are not this long. So you had a real test this first section. So our essential question is, how do scientists use observations and evidence to understand the world around us? So again, at the top of your paper, you should have the title of the notes, which is just chapter 1.1 notes. And then right underneath, you have the essential question, the EQ. How do scientists use observations and evidence to understand the world around us? And then this is the question you are going to be using for your summary at the end. At the end, you're going to give me 2 to 3 sentences based on the notes we take that answer the question, how do scientists use observations and evidence to understand the world around us? So make sure you write it down, because we always have to come back to it. I usually give each slide maybe 20 or 30 seconds, depending on how long it is. And then we move on. So our first slide, 1.1, what is science? So that blue title, that is the title of the slide, goes on the left side of your paper, and then across from it is all the bullet points. You don't have to squish all the bullet points in, just you can spread them out, that's okay. But science is a process for producing knowledge based on observations. In the end, we develop or test theories. Theories are proposed explanations of how a process works using these observations. But from observation to theory, it is basically the first step of the scientific method to the very last step, if that last step even happens. Science also refers to the cumulative body of knowledge produced by many scientists. Cumulative is a word related to accumulate. When you accumulate knowledge, you gather it. So all of these scientists performing all these experiments, gathering all this data and results, and gathering it, putting it all together, that is a cumulative body of work. Science rests on the assumption that the world is knowable and that we can learn about it by careful observation and logical reasoning. And again, you should have already written this. All you should be doing right now is filling in the, I don't know how many blanks there were the first slide. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 blanks in the first slide. So all you should be doing right now is filling in those 8 blanks. I believe the bold words are your blank spots. The basic principles in science. Like I said, the title, the blue goes on the left, all the bullet points in black go on the right. Repeatability. Inquiries should be reproducible. So we observe things, we ask a question, we perform an experiment. That experiment should be drawn out step by step so that other scientists can repeat the exact same process and either prove or disprove whatever results you get. 100% proof is elusive. We actually never use 100% anything in science, but anything above 90% is taken as a general fact. Because new evidence can always improve scientific knowledge, so no theory is ever considered 100% finished. But like I said, anything over 90%, we usually take as fact. Testable questions is a basic principle of science. Because we have to perform experiments and gather results and interpret those data and results, Questions must be testable by experiments. Or observations with some form of evidence that can be collected to either support or disprove a prediction, or support or reject. We use quite a few words. We don't use right and wrong. We don't say, oh, my hypothesis was right or my hypothesis was wrong. We either say it's supported, we gathered evidence, it was supported, or we gathered evidence and it was not supported or rejected. Like goes towards disproving a prediction. Science depends on skepticism and that reproducibility we were just talking about. Ideally, scientists are skeptical. We doubt all the time. I don't think that's how it happened. Let me try it. Let me do it again to see if I get the same results. They're cautious about accepting proposed explanations until there is substantial evidence to support it. Like I said, they gather all that knowledge and put together a cumulative body of evidence. Once there's enough evidence, then something becomes a theory. Scientists aim to be methodical and unbiased. Methodical just means they do things. They have a method. They do things in a certain way. The scientific method. The same method that you've studied every single science class you've ever taken. Or hopefully. And then unbiased means they don't lean towards one side or another. They stay completely neutral and they just gather the evidence. Scientists demand reproducibility. Making an observation or obtaining a result just once doesn't count for much. It has to be that cumulative body of gathered knowledge. You have to produce the same result consistently to be sure that your first outcome wasn't a fluke. Scientists use two types of reasoning. They go from small to big and then from big to small. So scientists deduce conclusions from general laws that they know to be true. This logical reasoning from general to specific is known as deductive reasoning. And then on the opposite end, reasoning from many observations to produce a general rule is called inductive reasoning. And if you guys have questions as I'm going through these, feel free to ask. Unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Scientific observations. The first step in understanding our environment is careful, detailed observation and evaluation of factors involved in pollution, environmental health, conservation, population, resources, and other issues. So environmental science is actually a unique branch of science because it pulls together all of these different branches and combines them. Knowing about the world we inhabit helps us understand where our resources originate and why. Also, how we use them effectively, or how we are not using things effectively right now and how we can do better. The scientific method. As I said, this is the same method that you should have been going over in every science class you've ever had. There's steps to the scientific method, and they're the same steps that scientists all over the world use so that they can repeat experiments. Because if we do two different experiments, or the same experiment, but two different ways, you can't compare results in the end. You have to do the same experiment the same way, and then you can compare your results. So the first step is always to make an observation, identify a question. So they go with the flashlight here. As an example, your flashlight doesn't light, and you think to yourself, what might be wrong? Second step is hypothesis. Flashlight doesn't work. I think the batteries are dead. You're going to test your hypothesis. The if-then statement is usually what we call the hypothesis. If I replace the batteries, then the flashlight should work. And then testing that hypothesis, the experiment step, that's what you actually go about doing. You get new batteries, you unscrew the flashlight, put in new batteries, turn it on. We're testing that hypothesis that batteries don't work. Step 4 is you gather data from your tests. These are called results. After you replace the batteries, did the light turn on? Yes or no? That's your data. That's all you need. Yes, the light turned on. No, it did not. And then you interpret your results and the conclusion. If the light works now, then your hypothesis was supported. I don't like that word. We don't use right and wrong. Your hypothesis was supported. I'm changing it. If not, your hypothesis was rejected. And then we start over. You form a new hypothesis. Okay, next time, maybe the light bulb is faulty. Maybe that's what we need to change. And then you go through all the steps again. This is something you encounter in everyday life, not just science. You go through this process of, this is what I think is wrong. Let's see how we can fix it. You do the thing to fix it. You either fixed it or you didn't. If you didn't, you start over and try to figure out something else. So this is just a general concept map, like a flow map. You don't have to write this down. We just wrote them all down. But this is just kind of a concept map. Identify a question, form your testable hypothesis, develop a test and actually test it, collect your data, interpret results. Your data either supports or rejects your original hypothesis. And then you, in the end, scientists report for their peers to review. See if they did the test in the same way, see if there's any bias, things like that. So you didn't have to draw that. You already wrote down 1 through 5. So understanding probability reduces uncertainty. Probability is a measure of how likely something is to occur. And like I said, in science, we don't ever use 100%. We can be reasonably sure. We can still take something as a fact, but it will never be 100%. Probability does not tell you what will happen, but tells you what is likely to happen. If you hear on the news that you have a 20% chance of catching a cold this winter, that means that 20 out of 100 people are likely to catch a cold. Maybe sometimes it's 18, maybe sometimes it's 22. This doesn't mean that you will catch one. In fact, it's actually more likely that you will not. There's an 80% chance that you will not catch a cold. And taking things like the flu shot puts the odds even more in our favor that we will not catch the flu. I know that's about a cold. There's no vaccine for the cold, but Doing things like that will reduce your chances of getting whatever communicable disease we're talking about, whether it's the flu, COVID, diphtheria, pertussis, any of those. Experimental design. So scientists go about doing experiments in various ways depending on what they're studying. A natural experiment is one that involves observation of events that have already happened. So if you ever want to work with animals, those are usually natural experiments. The most that scientists can usually do is observe them in their natural habitat and then just document what they do, how they act, what they eat, what influences their decisions out in the wild. Manipulative experiments have conditions deliberately altered and all other variables are held constant or controlled. Out in nature, there's not very much you can control. So observations is key. But in the lab, like a lot of medical experiments, those are manipulative experiments. You take a group of people with a headache, you split them into groups of 3. Group A gets Tylenol, group B gets Advil, group C gets a placebo or a sugar pill. And then in the end, you compare how well those medications helped make their headaches go away. We manipulated that one factor. Blind experiments are those which the researcher doesn't know which group is treated until after the data has been analyzed. So the researcher will look at all the data from all 3 groups. And then in the end, they'll tell whoever was in charge will tell them group A got this, group B got this, group C got this one. In health studies, such as tests of new drugs, like I was just saying, double-blind experiments are used, which neither the subject or the researchers know who was in the treatment group, who got the Tylenol, who got the Advil, or who was in the control group, which is the placebo, the sugar pill. So nobody knows which pill. On each of these studies, there is one independent variable and one or more dependent variables being measured. And I know you went over these variables a little bit more because most of you already took biology, or you should have. And then science is a cumulative process. There's that word again. Good science is rarely carried out by a single individual working in isolation. Instead, a community of scientists collaborates in a cumulative, self-correcting process. Like I said before, scientists are skeptical. Scientist A does something, gets results. Scientist B comes along and says, I don't know if you did this right. I'm going to do the exact same thing and see if I get the same results as you. And then that happens hundreds, thousands of times, and they come up with this collective, cumulative body of evidence. So the idea of consensus is very important in science. And sometimes new ideas emerge that cause major shifts in scientific consensus. These great changes in explanatory frameworks were called paradigm shifts. So the G in that word is silent. You say that, paradigm. I don't know who made up that word, but that's how you say it. And that is it for the notes. Like I said, these are the longest notes of this chapter. So you guys are troopers filling out all these notes. The next few weeks will be a little bit simpler. But write your summary on the last page. You should make a little box at the bottom. It says summary. Your summary should be 2 to 3 sentences that answer the essential question. So go back and reread the essential question. And then reread the notes you took, because in the notes should be the answers to the essential question. All right.